I am creating this screencast about the ACT Aspire test that is upcoming for all of our freshmen at Dodgeland High School. I'm hoping that I can take a little bit of time to share what this test looks like and some of the different aspects that go along with this test. All of us have access to the exemplars, and I thought I would show you how to access those as well as the tools. The main concern that I have when I take a look at this ACT Aspire test is to make sure that our students are capable of working with the technology first and foremost. And then you will see when you look at some of these questions about how important it is to take your time. And I've heard that we need to make sure that we work more on taking our time in assessment, analyzing, as well as the different tools that are available for students to use. So I'm going to take a look and I'm going to be using, for this one, I'm going to be using Firefox. And what I'm going to be entering into Firefox is the exemplar website. So to access this website, I had to enter in the address for the exemplar tests. They have all 5 exemplars on here. Because the ACT Aspire is actually meant to be grade levels 3 through 12, not all of these questions that you'll see are actually are going to be on the high school test, but you will see a variety of different questions that our students are asked to answer. So to get to this page right here that I'm at, the first thing that you need to do is you need to type in tn.actaspire.org. And once you do that, then it comes up to this page. And then you can start to see several different components already on this. The TN stands for Test Navigator, and the Test Navigator is the secure browser that is used for taking a look at the ACT Aspire. The 5 tests that exist are English, writing, reading, math, and science. So when I go into the exemplars, what you type in for your username is whichever subject area you'd like to take a look at. So what I'm going to enter in here for right now is I'm going to enter in science, as I was looking at this one several times, and then the password is ACT Aspire. And then you sign in. I am in Firefox. It asked me if I wanted to remember. And now you can see that I'm signed in, and because this is a practice test, it would normally have your name here when we do the actual test. This is allowing me to only log out. That's the only option that I have right now because I haven't started the test. As I scroll through before I start the test, you can see that it gives you specific directions. It tells you how much time. There's 42 questions. You'll have 2 hours to complete it. There's going to be a timer that's going to show up here. And in our directions, it says what you can and cannot use. And they even do give you a hint. If you get stuck on a question, you may want to skip it and come back to it later. And I'll show you how you'll be able to tell whether you've skipped a question or not. So I'm going to start the test now. It shows me that there's 42 questions in this section. By starting this section, you'll see that as the question pops up, over here's my timer. My timer started already. You can see here that this is the information. And what's tricky about this is if you really have to pay attention, that there is a scroll bar that is here. So there's multiple pieces of information. And what I didn't like when I took a look at this is that I have to flip back and forth between Table 1, Experiment 1, Table 2, and the graph. And I also have to understand what a viscometer does and taking a look at this and understanding this. Now I'm not going to try and answer these questions correctly, but it says, so based on experiments 1 and 2, the viscosity, so I'd have to go back to experiments 1 is this one, and experiment 2 is this one. So I have to be able to look back and forth between this information here and approximate what SAE 30 motor oil is going to be at. So I'm just going to select C, and once you select the answer to a question, you can move to the next question. Now there's a couple of other interesting features that pop up here. If I click back on this tab that shows the little person, if you remember before all I could do was log out, now it does allow me to do a couple of other things. Any of these will shut down your access to the test, but the timer continues. The only time that the timer will stop is when we actually submit our answers to the test. And that happens when I click over here. But here's a couple of the different features. There is a magnifying glass, so if you have difficulty with reading because it's too small, you can use the magnifying glass. If you're not sure, for example, if I wanted to see what this was here, what does that line is, that's point B. So I can zero in on some things and it'll magnify it a little bit for me. I can't change the size of the magnifying glass, unfortunately, but it does help me if I need to do some viewing of that. By going back and clicking on this, I can click it off. I can also use a line reader, which I can adjust to slide in. I can adjust this to go up so that it will only read one line at a time, and I can cover up other components. So by sliding through this, it's one way for me to make sure that I can maintain my focus only on the components that I'm reading. So they've added in that as a test aid. I also can do answer masking, which will allow me to eliminate specific answers. So if I have an idea already that this answer doesn't make any sense and this answer doesn't make any sense, I can mask those two answers and it leaves it up to these. So it does allow me to do that as a test aid as well. You can see where I'm at. It's allowing me to go back to the very beginning. If I'm not sure about the question, I go back up here and I click on the arrow and it moves me to the next one. Now notice here's another component that I thought was rather interesting to this test. I am still using this information here to answer the first 3 questions, and I believe it's actually the first 4. This one is a type that asks us to drag and drop these various things. So I have to click and hold, and I drop each of these into their proper place so that this becomes my answer. And again, I just move to the next question. I can always go back and change those answers because those answers are not submitted as of yet. So I can move on and continue to go through each of the questions. Notice that there is also a writing component that is involved, and this is true with all of the questions. With each of the tests, there is a written component. So explain why this is incorrect. So you have 720 characters where you can explain why this answer is correct. This answer is incorrect because, and then what I wanted to point out is if you take a look up here, notice again this timer is still running. No matter how much you wish to take a break, there is no way to stop that timer from running, and you are limited by the amount of time that's given for the test. I believe the science test is scheduled for, I don't want to give you inaccurate information, so I will give you that information on a different screencast. So I can now go over here and I clicked on the review, and it showed that I answered these questions and I didn't answer these two. So I can go back and find those questions. It also allows me to flag these so that I've flagged this one to go back and review it. So I can return back to the question. So even if there's one that I answered, like this one, I can still flag this one, which will tell me when I get through all of my testing, clicking on the review, this one I flagged because maybe I'm not sure about my answer. So this will allow you to check all those that are not answered, flagged. You saw before when I list all of them, these were not even viewed. And you can pick these in any order that you wish, but you're expected to answer all of them that appear on the test. And just like the ACT, they recommend that you should guess at a question rather than to leave it blank. So when I go back up to here and I click, this is the pointer, an answer eliminator allows me to do clicking on this one, which will cross out this answer. So not only when I was over at this point, remember we had the opportunity to answer mask, which masks all the answers, but I can also go over and use the answer eliminator to hide various answers. When I am finished with a test, it's going to ask me to, you finish all the questions, you want to log out of the test navigator, and what it's going to ask you then, do you want to exit this test and finish it later, which you can, which will then stop your timer, or if you are finished with a test and you want to submit your final answers. As of right now, nothing has been done. So if I hit cancel, my timer still keeps running. In the real test, the timer will continue to keep running on this test if I select to exit and finish later. So if somebody needs to use the restroom or there's another situation that arises where they need to leave their test station, they will select that they want to exit the test and finish later, but understand that the timer is still running. So if you only have 40 minutes to take the test, you still have to make sure that you are completing this test on time. So as I'm finished, it's going to allow me to submit my final answers, and then it tells you that you're finished. And it shows me that I'm logged out because I had submitted and finished my answers. So now if I want to sign back in, and I'm just going to pop in another test just to see what it looks like. So I type in the subject, and it's ACT Aspire, all lowercase. I'm not going to remember it. This one has 24 questions, gives you the hints, and we're ready to start the test. Notice that I'm signed in here, start the test section, and now, again, the same tools that I had over here with the magnifier, the line reader, and answer masking all exist for this one. What again you have to pay attention to is you see that there is this scroll bar, so you have to be able to read and scroll through this passage and to be able to pick the information out of this reading passage. I'm just going to select an answer here, move on to the next one, and again you can see that I can go in and review how I've done and return back to my questions. I can flag them. I could do answer masking. Remember that this allows me to answer eliminate, and my timer keeps running. And notice that I'm using the same passage again to answer this question. So one of the things that we have to really emphasize to our students before we take this ACT Aspire is that numerous questions are still based upon the same writing. And then if you'll take a look at this one says for question D or part C or part B, there'll be different components that they want you to make sure that you're paying attention to. So these are all different English-related types of questions. Given that all of these are accurate, which one provides the most relevant information at this point in the essay? So having read through this essay, looking at this highlighted statement, what was most relevant? Moving on to the next one. It's still about this. And now notice that they've added from point A. Where would I insert this? At point A, which is right here, at point B. So you can see that this has some pretty in-depth critical thinking types of questions that our students will have to be able to answer. And then each of them, again, I'm trying to find over here where you will have to do a typewritten response instead of an multiple choice selection. What change, if any, should be made to the highlighted word? So you have to pay attention over here again to the different highlights and make sure that you understand that you have to scroll through these passages. I'm going to log out of this one and I'm going to log into and because this is the exemplar, it just signs you out. It doesn't show you whether or not you have tests to continue working with. I do want to sign back into the math one just to show you ACT Aspire. One other tool that's available to our students. Okay, so again, if you take a look at this, was surprising to me is explain why this procedure won't always work. So why did this work the first time, but why it's not correct the second time? So you can see up here that what was added is an additional button, and when you hover over this, it'll tell you that it is a scientific calculator. So by clicking on this, we have to make sure that our students understand how to work with a scientific calculator and potentially what each of these buttons mean. So we are going to have to make sure that they're familiar with using this calculator. You are allowed to bring in your own calculator as long as it meets certain requirements. So that's an introduction. Again, all of the other tools are also available here. In this particular question, it doesn't make sense for us to have a answer masking. So it wasn't there, but see that it does appear the next time. That's just a brief introduction to the ACT Aspire. There is a lot of information here that we have to be able to teach our students at Dodgeland High School and our freshmen. And I'm hoping that by looking at this that you'll be able to at least take some time to show this to the students and get them an opportunity to do some playing in here. I did find out that just by playing around with it that I was able to access on my iPad as well using Safari. So I guess I shouldn't be surprised. Safari would be our I'm drawing a blank. It would be our browser that we would be using if we were using MacBooks. And I did test before. I had some issues using Chrome, but now it seems to be unfixed because they're going to be allowed to be done on Chromebooks as well. But they do recommend that the best browser to use is Firefox or to use Safari. So I was able to do some playing around with this as well on our iPads. If you do have some questions, please feel free to come in and talk to me, and we can discuss a little bit further what this looks like as we move forward with the upcoming testing.